The 8th of May 2013, the day where the collapse started. The day Alex Ferguson would leave Manchester United after almost 27 years as manager. Over those almost 27 years, Alex Ferguson would transform Man United, winning 13 Premier League titles and 2 Champions Leagues. The truth is, everybody knew Manchester United would struggle to replace Sir Alex Ferguson, however, maybe not this much. The truth is, we're now 12 years on, and Man United still haven't recovered. And if you don't believe me, here are some stats. In 27 years, Sir Alex Ferguson's worst defeat as Man United boss was actually 2 years before he left. In 2011, they lost 6-1 to Manchester City. However, since then, those hammerings have become, well, way more frequent. 2022-2023 saw Liverpool hammer Manchester United 7-0 in the Premier League. 2020-21 saw Manchester United get humiliated at home to Tottenham 6-1 in the Premier League. 2021-2022 saw Liverpool annihilate Manchester United at Old Trafford 5-0 in the Premier League. Man United would lose 4-1 in the Premier League to Watford in the 2021-2022 season, lose 4-0 away to Everton in the 18-19 Premier League season, 4-0 away to Brentford in the 2022-2023 season. I could go on and on and on. Man United's results this season have been nothing short of horrifying, losing 3-0 at home to Bournemouth just a couple of weeks ago, 2-0 at home to Newcastle just a couple of weeks ago, 3-0 at home to Tottenham in September. But the problem isn't this season, it's what's fundamentally wrong at the club. Since Alex Ferguson left in 2013, Manchester United have now had 7 different managers. That means that they get a new manager on average every 1.7 years, which for a club like Manchester United is just not what anybody would have thought. But it's not just management of the team, it's the ownership of the club, which is also a massive problem. Also recruitment, and the massive overspending and overpaying for pretty much average players. So today it's time for the catastrophic collapse of Manchester United. Now the timing of this video actually seems a little bit off, considering Man United are actually coming off a really good result. They managed to pick up a 2-2 draw at Liverpool. Considering Man United fans were hoping that the game was called off, a 2-2 draw is a fantastic result considering they're near the bottom of the table and Liverpool have been on pretty much untouchable form. They also managed to pick up a win against struggling Manchester City earlier in the season, which obviously shocked everyone. Yet at the same time, at the moment, they're in not much better than relegation form. This season truly is the tip of the iceberg. Amorim's got a big job on his hands and I'm pretty sure he knows that. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. But first of all, I want to talk about the managers and appointment of managers since Sir Alex Ferguson left. And I guess the expectation was that once David Moyes was made manager, straight after Sir Alex Ferguson, that the transition was going to be very smooth. You know, David Moyes had done a great job at Everton, but at the same time, Everton are not the calibre of club as Man United. It's a different type of job. And to be honest, I don't think Man United or the Man United fans had the patience for transition. And to back up the lack of patience, David Moyes didn't even get a year in charge before he was sacked. In July 2014 came the turn of Louis van Gaal. He'd manage 103 games and he'd also win an FA Cup, but that wouldn't cut it. He was replaced by Jose Mourinho in May 2016, and he'd actually take them to win a Europa League, which is actually quite an achievement with the team and the coach that they had at the time. But to be honest, I think he lost the plot. He was replaced by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in December of 2018. He is the current longest serving manager since Ferguson, however, it never really worked out and it did end pretty nastily in the end. There'd then be a few interims and caretaker managers. Michael Carrick had a few games, Ralf Rangnick had half a season, until Erik ten Hag would take over in May 2022, and this is where everybody thought things would change. Now, Ten Hag would manage to win an FA Cup and a League Cup, but to be honest, at this point, with the money spent, it just wasn't good enough. And now, of course, it's Ruben Amorim's turn. It is pretty clear that there was a distinct lack of patience over the years. Just simply because the expectation of Man United is that they're going to be, you know, competing for, well, winning the league. Yet the state of the club, deeper than just the management, just deeper than just the manager, kind of dictated that just couldn't happen. To be honest, for anyone that's came into Manchester United over the past few years as manager, it's kind of felt like that they've been trying to steer their Titanic away from the iceberg that sunk it. Right, I'm going to move on to the signings that have been made over the years since Alex Ferguson left. We're going to take a look at the calibre of players, we're going to take a look at how they've performed, and we're going to take a look at the money paid. In the 2014-15 season, Manchester United bought in Angel Di Maria from Real Madrid for €75 million. Now, it's got to be said that at the time, you know what? He was probably worth that. However, he was a horrendous flop at Man United for whatever reason. They paid €37.5 million for an 18-year-old Luke Shaw from Southampton. And to be fair, he's been a bit of a workhorse for Man United over the years, and can't really say it's that bad of a transfer. They signed Ander Herrera from Athletic Club in La Liga for €36 million, who actually turned out to be a decent signing. He played quite a few times for Man United. They paid €20 million for Marcus Rojo from Sporting. Probably didn't turn out to be the greatest signing. They'd bring in Radamel Falcao on a loan from Monaco, and that never really worked out either. In the 15-16 season, they purchased Anthony Martial from Monaco for €60 million. He had a couple of good seasons, but then completely faded away. They paid €35 million for Morgan Schneiderlin from Southampton. God knows who thought it was a good idea to pay €35 million. They bought Memphis Depay from PSV for €34 million, who never worked out at all at Man United. They purchased Bastian Schweinsteiger from Bayern Munich for €9 million, so to be honest, at that point, his legs had already gone. They paid €105 million for Paul Pogba, despite letting him go to Juventus for basically nothing a couple of seasons prior. Now, he never really shone at Man United. He never really showed the potential that he was showing at Juventus, and it was definitely €105 million that they'll never see ever again. They paid €42 million for Henrik Mkhitaryan from Borussia Dortmund, and it didn't work out for him at Man United at all. €38 million for Eric Bailly from Villarreal. Just a ridiculous fee, let's just say that. The best bit of business they actually did was bringing in Zlatan Ibrahimovic on a free, but to be honest, it never really worked out for him either. In the 17-18 season, they paid €84.7 million for Romelu Lukaku, and to be honest, never really worked out for him at Man United. They paid €44.7 million for Nemanja Matic from Chelsea, and to be honest, probably pretty decent signing. He did perform pretty well for Man United for a decent period of time. €34 million for Alexis Sanchez from Arsenal. He was a disaster at Man United, but amazing at Arsenal and Barcelona. In the 18-19 season, they paid €59 million for Fred from Shakhtar Donetsk, which has got to be one of the most inflated transfer fees I've ever seen. In the 19-20 season, they signed Harry Maguire for €87 million from Leicester City. Now, Leicester, when they saw that transfer fee come in, must have been absolutely laughing their heads off, because that isn't just the wackiest transfer fee you'll ever see for a player like Harry Maguire. They spent €65 million on Bruno Fernandes from Sporting, and to be honest, he's probably been one of the best players over the past few years, I've got to say. They paid €55 million for Aaron Wan-Bissaka from Crystal Palace, who, to be completely honest, has fell off. He had maybe one good season, and then has been really injury prone. They brought in Yudion Igalo on a loan from a team in China called Shenbua. They paid €12 million as a fee to loan him at 30 years old. Got to be one of the strangest signings I think I've seen. In the 2021 season, they paid €39 million for Donny van der Beek. They signed him. He was promising. Maybe it didn't quite work out for him, but he's only just got out of there. It's strange. It's a really strange one. They just didn't really play him. I think it was one of those signings where no one really knew what to do with him. Always seemed like a good player, but it just never worked out. They paid €21.3 million for Amad Diallo from Atalanta, and to be honest, he seems like a decent player. They picked up an aging Edison Cavani from PSG on a free transfer, and to be honest, nothing really ever happened when he played. It didn't really work out for him. To be honest, he was getting on a little bit anyway, and to be honest, it was probably his last big move. In the 21-22 season, they paid €85 million for Jadon Sancho from Borussia Dortmund, and they absolutely ruined him, and then he went straight back to Dortmund and performed, and now he's at Chelsea and starting and playing pretty well. It's almost like there's a curse. €40 million for Rafael Varane. Now, the reason why Real Madrid let him go is because he was already knackered. His legs had gone already, so it just seemed like a really strange signing for €40 million. He was really good at Real Madrid, but if he was still any good, they would have kept him. They paid €17 million to bring back Cristiano Ronaldo from Juventus. Now, it's arguable that he actually made the team worse, yet at the same time seemed to carry them with his goals. It was such a strange one, however, it makes sense to bring him back. Now we have the 2022-2023 transfer window, which has honestly got to want to be the worst one. It's got to be one of the worst ones for Man United. They paid €95 million for Anthony from Ajax, the fidget spinner. Probably one of the worst signings in Premier League history. 70 million euros for Casemiro from Real Madrid, and it's the same story as Varane. His legs have gone. If he was still able to do the business, Real Madrid wouldn't have let him go. It's 70 million down the drain. Not saying Casemiro wasn't a world-class player, but he's not at Man United. And it shows. It definitely shows when they change the midfield up and they have players with more energy. 57 million euros for Lisandro Martinez from Ajax. Now, I don't think he's a bad player, but he's not worth that money. They brought in Christian Eriksen on a free transfer from Brentford, and while he's a decent player, he's not Man United quality at the moment. Or maybe he was at his peak before he had, obviously, that horrific accident. But his legs have completely gone, and once again, it's a similar thing with Casemiro. When they replace him in midfield, it really shows. It really shows how much his legs have gone. In the 23-24 season, they signed Rasmus Højlund for 73.9 million euros from Atalanta. Rasmus Højlund is a good player. He's not worth that money. Probably worth 30 million euros at most. And I feel like you're almost setting players up to fail by signing them for such a large fee when they're so young. And it's really difficult for them to cope with the pressure, especially when we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Of course, the culture and the feeling in the club is just not good. They signed Mason Mount from Chelsea for 64 million euros. It's inexcusable, this sort of money. Mason Mount was a decent player for Chelsea, but not worth half of that money. Which is, it is the way it is. It's just a crazy, crazy signing. 50 million euros for Andre Onana. Now, it's got to be one of the biggest falls from grace. They had David De Gea, who performed for, 10 years at Man United. Even in his last season, he was the best goalkeeper in the Premier League. The second to last season, the best goalkeeper in the Premier League. Let him go on a free and replace it. That is a massive, massive downgrade. And they've paid 50 million euros. I'm sorry, Andre Onana is not a good goalkeeper. He makes too many mistakes, especially for Man United. Yeah, not a good signing. The 24-25 transfer window. What have we had this year? Well, they signed Lenny Yoro from Lille for 62 million euros. Once again, he's obviously a very talented player. However, signing him for 62 million euros puts a massive amount of pressure on an 18-year-old's back. And don't get me wrong, we've not seen that much of him because he got injured in pre-season. And you know what? I hope he does well. But if he doesn't, then I wouldn't be surprised. Is he worth 62 million euros? I don't think we've really figured that out yet. Manuel Ugarte from PSG for 50 million euros. Now, he's clearly a good player. Once again, whether he's worth 50 million euros, we don't really know yet. Matthijs de Ligt from Bayern Munich for 45 million euros. Now, of course, Matthijs de Ligt is, or at least for a couple of seasons when he was at Ajax and then kind of didn't really work out too well for him at Juventus. We'll see what comes of it this season, but once again, I just feel like they've paid over the odds for him. I mean, he was really, really promising at Ajax, and I feel like the move to Juventus has killed him off a little bit. Now, I don't want to say his legs have gone, he's only 25, but it kind of seems a little bit that way. 42.5 million euros for Joshua Zirkzee. Decent player, not worth 42 million euros. It's one of those situations, again, they've paid 40 million euros for this kid. And I say this kid, he's 23 years old. They've paid 42 million euros for this young player. And I feel like they're just putting too much pressure on him. That transfer fee puts so much pressure on someone. That's Mazraoui from Bayern Munich for 15 million euros, and it seems like a pretty decent signing. I think they've paid a pretty good price for him. But I've got to say that a lot of these signings just haven't worked out for Man United over the years. Once again, I feel like if Man United want to sign your player, you just double or triple the amount that you actually think they're worth, and Man United probably pay it. Along with, like I said, signing a lot of young players for massive fees, and it never really working out because, well, there's just too much pressure on them. And also signing players that are tired. They've already had really, really successful careers, and the move to Man United is almost like winding down, like you see a lot of these players going to the Saudi League. Real Madrid don't let Casemiro or Varane go to Man United if they're both at the top of the game, and they're not. They're tired, and they're past it, basically. I think we've got to take a look at the ownership of the club. Now, the Glazers. The Glazers, this terrible, terrible word that a lot of Man United fans talk about. The Glazers simply are the people who own Manchester United. They purchased the first stake in the club in March 2003, spending around about £9 million on a 2.9% stake. And pretty much from day one, the Man United fans were not happy with the Glazers, and, well, it kind of makes sense. The Glazers couldn't afford to buy the shares in Man United, so they basically took out loans to buy the shares. But to secure the loans, they would use the assets of Manchester United, meaning that for whatever reason, if they couldn't pay back this debt, they would basically be able to seize assets from the club. So what this means is they bought a football club with money they don't have and immediately put all of the debt onto the club they've just bought. Before this, Man United were debt-free. And yeah, so they instantly lost the fans. The Glazers have splashed over £2 billion on transfers while they've been in charge, but it really does feel like you're just paving over the cracks. You're trying to pacify people to keep them at bay, while obviously there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and maybe it's not just down to the owners. Now, a group called Ineos now owns a minority stake, a 28.94% stake in Manchester United. This doesn't mean Man United have new owners, because Ineos only have a minority stake. And if you thought that the Glazers' ownership was bad, well, Ineos already own, actually, other football clubs. They own Nice in France, and Swiss League side FC Lausanne Sport. Now, I think you'll only have to ask a few Nice fans to see what they think of Ineos, and, well, it's not good. So far, there's been no patience for new management. There's been a lot of really, really bad signings, maybe players that were previously quite good, and it never really worked out for them at Man United. Maybe they've paid way too much for them, maybe they've signed them when they're already on the decline. They've got ownership of the club through Ineos, who have previously done a pretty terrible job at Nice, and of course the Glazers, who've just dumped a lot of debt into the club, running it more like a business than an actual football club. Now, a name to mention is Ed Woodward. Basically an accountant and investment banker who was put in charge of Man United's transfers for 10 years between 2012 and 2022, lacked football knowledge and didn't really allow anyone to help him. He would refuse to hire a director of football who could actually provide footballing knowledge, not just knowledge on numbers, and was probably one of the main contributing factors to managers like Eric Van Gaal and Jose Mourinho not doing as well as they could have. I mean, the transfers really didn't help. He was replaced in 2022, but for 10 years, just at the start of, or just at the end of Alex Ferguson's reign to just a couple of years ago. And to be honest, I think one of the biggest problems at Man United over the past maybe, 10, 15 years has probably been the culture since Alex Ferguson left. A lack of patience, a lack of care for anything going on the pitch. I mean, your job as a footballer is to play football to the best of your ability to help the team do as well as possible. And that must be pretty difficult to do when you've got all of this disastrous situation going on off the pitch. Especially for those new players that just arrive at Man United. They've got a massive price tag, they've got all of this pressure, and it's just absolute chaos. Nobody knows what is going on. There's no wonder these great players, these big names that come to Man United who've been so good at the former clubs and have earned the move to Man United, there's no wonder a lot of them don't perform. And while some of those bad signings were simply down to just being bad signings, you know, paying too much for players that are not worth what they've been paid for, a lot of them, I think, probably would have worked out a lot better if the culture and the feeling at the club was better. And it's hard to put your finger on one thing when there's so many things wrong, basically. The bottom line is, since Alex Ferguson left, Manchester United have not won a Premier League title, they've not won a Champions League, and they've never reached the heights that they reached under Sir Alex Ferguson. Like I said, even though a decent result at Anfield and maybe a decent result at Man City earlier in the season, this season for Man United has been nothing short of a disaster. I mean, over Christmas and New Year, it was the worst league positioning. What was it, 14th over Christmas or over New Year? Like, people genuinely putting them in a relegation battle. Of course, they're not going to get relegated. There's so many really, really bad teams in the Premier League this season that it's virtually impossible for them to go down. But for those people that might not have watched that much football over the past 10, 15 years, they probably always know Man United as a team who just aren't really up there with the likes of, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, maybe Chelsea this season. But not long ago, Not long ago, they were completely and utterly dominant, and it's really, really difficult. It's really, really difficult when you don't know that to recognise that. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. That is the collapse of Manchester United. When it comes to transfers, they can be debatable. Maybe some people would argue that some of the transfers that I've said were not worth it and weren't good. Maybe you think they were good. But I'm just being honest. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, maybe you should check out this video on screen. YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy it, so maybe you should check it out. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.